Hi and welcome to part 2 of this time-lapse tutorial of how to draw a fox in soft pastels. So we're going in and starting to do the ear. And in the same way as we did in part 1, if you saw that with me, I'm putting in the soft pastel base using the Unison soft pastels, and then I'm going over that with the pastel pencils to create that lovely sort of base layer to then work on top of to get some element of detail in. You can see that that ear is quite out of focus, it's quite blurry, so there isn't particularly much detail to be gained there, it's just more of getting the tonal values right. And you can see as well with the background, I just went in with the pastel pencils and I created sort of a green halo there. There is a bit of a green, bright green glow in the green, so I didn't want it to be completely solid green because I wanted to go over and do these lovely wispy bits of hairs that are going over the top of the ear. Can you see that? So I needed to have the background established before going in and putting that in. You want to work from the back of the subject to the front. So the things that you can see behind first, and then the things at the very forefront, you do those last so that it gets that impression of it looking real and those things looking closer to you. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going in and I'm getting those base layers in again. So I've mapped in where my basic colors and basic shapes are. And you want to do this so that you've got a guide to follow. You want something really simple to be able to go on top of with the pencils and get those lovely details in. But you can't go straight in with the details. You need to establish that sort of base layer first. And in getting that right, you give yourself a real good head start to then be able to get those beautiful details in because they will sit wonderfully on top. And as you can see, I've gone from dark to light and I'm doing little wispy bits of hair and it's all just layering gradually. So the dark hairs first and then working up to those lovely light hairs. And then the same principle applies here doing the ear. I've gone in and I've got that sort of base layer in, and then I'm going in and I'm gradually building up the details with the pencils. So I'm going from dark to light. I'm using a really light pressure. You don't want to press particularly hard. And then I'm going in as well with the darker pencils, I think you just saw, into those lighter sections. So I'm going back over what I've done and just creating some depth by getting some shadows into the lighter areas. So I'm just gradually building up these layers and just starting to make it look a bit more realistic by starting to get in those directions of the fur. You're creating the sort of the three-dimensionalness of the face by the way in which you put that fur down because it needs to be curved and shaped. You've got to think of the sort of the anatomy of what you're drawing. So those curves and those shapes are making that sort of 3D effect. Whereas if they were all going in one straight line, it would just look like a flat piece of paper. You wouldn't be able to particularly see that there was any sort of depth or any sort of shape there. So as this is hopefully showing you, I've gone from dark to light again and I've just gradually built up those layers. And it's very much a process that you can sort of follow on everything you do, and you can apply it to all your portraits of just building up those layers in the right way to then get those details on top. So this time I'm using the pan pastels for the base layers. I've got a really good set of grey pan pastels, so I tend to use those rather than the soft pastel sticks. But as you can see, I always do, I always do go back to those soft pastel sticks. So I'm using them just to start to get that background in. And I wanted that background as established as possible because you've got all these lovely wispy bits of neck hair which are curling over it. And as I said before with the ear, you want to make sure that that is established before you then go in on top of it, because you don't want to have to be going back over that when you've got lovely detail on top. So you want to make sure that you get this in first, and then that way you can work over the top of it and not have to go backwards. So as you can see, there's sort of that glow in the background. So I've gone in with some blues and some lighter greens, and I've just created that sort of that glow that you can see. So it's a blurry, out of focus background, but it does give some depth to the scene rather than just being a solid green. And then again, I'm going in to do the lovely sort of the grey white bits of hair around the bottom of the mouth, bottom of the face, and the neck. And these were lovely sort of thick chunks of fur. So it's a slightly different texture to what we were doing in the face. So that's one of the really good things about this tutorial. If you check it out on my Patreon channel, it's all in real time and I talk you through everything I'm doing as I go. So which pencils I'm picking up, how I'm using them, how I'm holding them, sort of pressure I'm using. So I do talk you through from start to finish, everything in real time, what I'm doing. But just to show you briefly here, you can see that that hair is a completely different texture. So it's a slightly different way of putting it in. And one really good tip is that you want to make sure that your pencil strokes are the same length as the hairs that you are seeing. So if you print out the photograph of what you're drawing and hold it next to your drawing, is your pencil stroke the same sort of length as the hair that you're seeing? So I hope that this has been helpful. I hope it's given you an insight into what we cover in the real-time tutorial. Do check that out on Patreon if you want to draw along, or if you're just interested in time lapses. I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel, and I will see you for part 3 next week. Take care, guys. Bye.